Everyone celebrates Henry Ford as the man who put the world on wheels, who democratized the automobile, who made cars affordable for ordinary people. History remembers him as a visionary and a genius of manufacturing. But very few people understand what it really took to build his empire. Behind the efficiency, assembly lines, and American dream of mass production was a machine so powerful, controlled, and ruthless. It quietly reshaped labor, power, and modern industry forever. The River Rouge complex was not just a factory like other factories. It was a system designed to dominate everything around it, to control every variable, to eliminate uncertainty at every stage. By the end of this story, you will see clearly why River Rouge was not just about building cars and putting them on roads. It was about controlling every single step of production, from raw iron in the ground to the final vehicle rolling off the line. But here is the question that no one asks, the uncomfortable question that historians often avoid. What happens when one company tries to control everything? What does that mean for the workers who labor in such a system? What does it mean for the economy as a whole? What are the hidden costs and hidden vulnerabilities? Because the answer reveals a side of Ford that history often softens and romanticizes. But reality never did. In the early 1900s, cars were luxury items that only wealthy people could afford. Automobiles were toys for the rich. Henry Ford changed that entire dynamic with his innovation of mass production. His Model T became affordable, reliable, and revolutionary. It was a car that regular people could actually buy and own and drive. As demand for automobiles exploded across America and then the world, Ford faced a problem that most companies dream of having. He needed more. More production. More control. More speed. More independence from suppliers who could potentially slow him down or raise prices. And that is where the idea of River Rouge comes in, a concept that would transform not just Ford's company but the entire nature of industrial production. Henry Ford did not just want to build cars faster than his competitors. He wanted to eliminate friction at every stage of production. He saw suppliers as potential bottlenecks. He saw transport costs as unnecessary drains on profits. He saw delays in getting materials as disruptions to output. So he asked a radical question that few industrialists had asked before. What if everything needed to build a car existed in one place? What if instead of relying on outside suppliers, everything was done internally, in one massive integrated facility? That revolutionary idea became River Rouge, a massive industrial complex that would be built in Dearborn, Michigan. It was not just a factory where cars were assembled. It was an entire ecosystem of production where everything happened together. River Rouge was not built overnight. It grew gradually and systematically into one of the largest industrial facilities in the world. The scale was almost impossible to imagine. Raw materials came in one end of the facility and finished vehicles left the other end. Iron ore was turned into steel in integrated mills. Steel became parts and components. Parts became engines and transmissions. Engines became automobiles. All of this happened within a single interconnected system. And this is where things become intense. Where the story moves beyond simple business efficiency. Because Ford was not just building efficiency in the traditional sense. He was building control. He was building a system that would allow him to control every variable, every input, every process. Most companies in the early 1900s relied on suppliers for various components and raw materials. Ford rejected that model entirely. He bought iron mines to ensure steady supply of ore. He owned ships to transport ore across the Great Lakes. He controlled rail systems to move materials where they needed to go. He even secured rubber plantations in Brazil to supply the rubber needed for tires. Every link in the supply chain was either owned directly by Ford or tightly controlled through contracts. But here is what most people miss. When they study this achievement, this was not just about saving money or improving efficiency in a conventional sense. It was about eliminating dependency. Because dependency creates vulnerability. And Ford wanted no vulnerability. He wanted complete control. Inside River Rouge, production moved at a speed that was revolutionary and shocking. Very fast. Workers stood on assembly lines, performing the same repetitive tasks over and over again, 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. Each person was responsible for a small, precise function. Efficiency increased dramatically. Productivity numbers were extraordinary. But so did the fatigue that workers experienced. Monotony became a silent and oppressive challenge for people doing the same movements thousands of times per day. And turnover rates began to rise significantly. Workers did not stay employed at Ford for long. The work was demanding and mentally exhausting. The environment was intense and controlled. And Ford noticed something troubling. High turnover was slowing production because new workers needed training. In a bold move that shocked the business world, Ford doubled wages to $5 per day. At the time, it was revolutionary, shocking, and unprecedented. Workers lined up around the block for jobs. Turnover dropped dramatically. Productivity improved because experienced workers stayed longer. But here is where the story deepens and becomes more complex. This wage increase was not just generosity or kindness toward workers. It was strategy. Ford needed stability in his workforce. He needed reliable workers who would show up and perform well. He needed predictable output. The wage increase was an investment in control, an investment in the system that would allow him to maintain the discipline and consistency he demanded. And it worked brilliantly. But it also reshaped labor expectations across America, setting new standards that other industries would eventually have to meet. River Rouge became more than just a factory or an industrial facility. It became a model for how companies could organize production. Other industries began copying Ford's approach. Vertical integration, mass production, standardized labor. The world was shifting toward building systems rather than just products. But as the empire expanded across the country and internationally, so did its complexity. And complexity brings risks that are not always obvious at first. But here is what most people miss when they analyze River Rouge: a system that large and that interdependent becomes incredibly difficult to manage. Small inefficiencies do not stay small. They multiply and cascade through the system. One delay in raw materials arriving can slow an entire production chain. One labor disruption in one department can ripple across the whole operation. And no one saw clearly how fragile such a massive system could become, at least not at first when everything was working smoothly. As River Rouge scaled to enormous size, management challenges increased significantly. Coordination became much harder when you have thousands of workers in different departments all depending on each other. Communication delays appeared. Different departments began operating like separate worlds with their own priorities. Ford's desire for total control created a paradox that would haunt him. The more he centralized control, the harder it became to maintain flexibility and respond to unexpected problems. Ford was known throughout the industrial world for strict oversight and rigid discipline. He believed in order, consistency, and predictability. Workers were monitored constantly. Behavior expectations extended beyond the factory floor into workers' personal lives. Ford's approach was not just industrial policy. It was philosophical. He believed that stability in workers' lives and habits would lead to stability in production. But this level of personal control also raised serious concerns. Critics argued that it blurred the line between work and personal life in an unhealthy way. Still, the production numbers spoke loudly. River Rouge was incredibly productive and efficient. But then the outside world started changing in ways that Ford could not fully control. Global markets evolved. Competition increased from companies using different approaches. New manufacturing techniques emerged. Companies began experimenting with decentralization and flexibility. Adaptability was becoming more valuable than pure control. Here is the turning point. Ford's rigid, centralized system, optimized for control, faced pressure from adaptive competitors. At first glance, River Rouge looked completely unstoppable and invincible. It appeared to be a perfectly engineered system, designed to eliminate waste and maximize production. But beneath that strength was a dangerous dependency on stability, on consistency, on everything going according to plan, on scale never being reduced. Systems designed for control often sacrifice adaptability, and adaptability is what markets reward over time. This pattern did not just affect Ford personally, it influenced how modern corporations would be structured. how governments would organize economies, how global supply chains would develop. If you step back, a clear principle emerges. Ford's empire was not just about cars, it was about removing uncertainty, control over supply chains, control over labor, control over production processes, control over time and timing. But here is the crucial insight. Systems optimized for control often sacrifice resilience and adaptability. Adaptability is what allows systems to survive shocks and disruptions. Look at today's economy and modern systems. Global supply chains that span continents. Large corporations that try to control many operations. Central banks managing monetary systems. And interest rates. Many modern systems rely on the same principles that Ford used. Efficiency through scale, control through integration, stability through centralized management. But when disruptions happen, whether from inflation rising suddenly, supply shocks from geopolitical events, or unexpected crises, these systems reveal their hidden vulnerabilities, just like River Rouge decades earlier. A highly optimized system that works well under normal conditions can become fragile and unstable under stress. And that is the key lesson. Efficiency and resilience are not the same thing. A system can be extremely efficient but still be vulnerable. Here is the deeper truth behind River Rouge. It was not just an industrial achievement or a business success story. It was an experiment in total control, in attempting to eliminate uncertainty at every level of production. And for a time, it worked brilliantly. But the hidden cost was this: the more a system tries to control everything, the more it depends on everything going right. And when even one part fails, when even one link in the chain breaks, the entire system feels the impact. River Rouge showed the world what extreme integration could achieve in terms of efficiency, but it also quietly exposed the limits of such systems and their hidden fragility. In the end, River Rouge was not just about building cars faster, it was about redefining how power moves through an economy. It proved that control can create extraordinary efficiency and productivity on a scale that had never been achieved before, but it also introduced hidden fragility into the system. Fragility that only became visible when circumstances changed. And maybe the real question historians should ask is not how much control is possible in an economic system, but how much control is too much, because in systems like River Rouge, built on extreme integration and control, the strength and the weakness are often the same thing. The very features that make the system efficient also make it vulnerable. Interconnectedness allows for perfect coordination, but it also means that problems cascade quickly. The centralization that enables command and control also means the system cannot adapt quickly. When circumstances change, Ford's River Rouge complex stands as a monument to what is possible when someone has a clear vision and the resources to pursue it ruthlessly, but it also stands as a warning. It warns us that systems built entirely on control and efficiency without consideration for adaptability and resilience will eventually face challenges they cannot overcome. It warns us that power concentrated in one person, or one company, or one system, can create extraordinary results in the short term but may create hidden vulnerabilities in the long term. The River Rouge story is ultimately about understanding trade-offs. In how we build systems, we can optimize for control and efficiency, but that comes at a cost to adaptability. We can try to eliminate all uncertainty, but uncertainty is part of reality. And systems that fail to acknowledge that truth do so at their peril. The brilliance of River Rouge was real, but so was its hidden fragility, and understanding both of those truths is essential to understanding not just Ford, but how modern systems work today.